So, this is going to be a quick video going over FamiWiki. Now, what is FamiWiki? It is basically a wiki going over the Famicom and everything else in between. I won't really go into the nitty-gritty of this wiki, so I'd recommend visiting FamiWiki.net and joining our Discord. But the main focus of this video is one glaring issue I wanted to address with this wiki, and that's the fact that the internet in general tends to treat the Famicom as just a Japanese NES for some reason. Now, in our FAQ page, we do address this issue, and our solution is the Famicom and NES are different consoles, but they fall under the same platform. And what is that platform called? It's not called NES. It's not called Famicom, it's called 8-bit Nintendo. And we applied the same thing for both the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo, and we call that 16-bit Nintendo. And the reason we call it this is we want to avoid bias picking one or the other for FamiWiki. Currently, sites like Wikipedia tend to treat this stuff as, oh, NES and Super Nintendo because they are very North American biased. But I'm trying to avoid as much conflict as possible with FamiWiki. This also includes giving definitions for both console and platform because they tend to be used interchangeably online. But our justification is that different consoles can exist, but they can still fall under the same platform. So you know how the Nintendo Switch has like 3 different models. You have like the standard one, you have the light one, and you have the OLED. But the general platform is still Nintendo Switch. That's the definitions we're leaning towards. Sure, those are 3 different consoles, but they still fall under the same platform. The issue is, the internet tends to call the platform for both the Famicom and NES as the NES platform, which is pretty dishonest for what it actually is, considering the general library of 8-bit Nintendo games never released on NES. There's also a bunch of misconceptions I wanted to clear up about the Famicom in the Western world. Because of how poorly documented the Famicom is on the English internet, a lot of misconceptions have popped up about it. Like, the pronunciation of Famicom is Famicom, but in English it's pronounced Famicom because it's short for family computer. Or how about the Famicom releasing during the video game crash of 1983? Which, there's like a whole rabbit hole of misconceptions about the crash of 83 that I won't get into. A lot of portrayals of the video game crash of 83 I tend to see on the internet treats it as a global event when in reality it was mainly an issue in North America. In fact, it has the nickname Atari Shock in Japan because the whole thing kicked off from third-party companies making crappy Atari games. And one of the glaring issues I tend to see is the Famicom using discs instead of cartridges. And this mainly stems from people misinterpreting the Famicom disk system as, quote, the Japanese NES for some reason. Like, I think it's gotten so bad even Cosmic had to address it in a video. And before you leave comments saying, oh, the Famicom is literally the exact same thing as the NES, I have a page to completely disprove that argument. Sure, they do definitely share some similarities. I'm not arguing against that. But calling the Famicom and NES the same thing is a bit silly, considering the amount of differences both consoles have to each other. Like, it's to the point where you can objectively pick whether you want to play on a Famicom or an NES. There's actual advantages and disadvantages between the two. But yeah, that's my little short rant about how the internet likes to mix the Famicom and NES a lot. If you are interested in helping contribute to FamiWiki, I'll leave a link to FamiWiki.net in the description. And I highly recommend joining our Discord server as it has definitely some more info and resource links that we've been using. I want the documentation for the Famicom to go from barely documented at all to just a library full of documentation about literally everything you need to know about it. As of recording this video, our main goal is mainly just get pages put up for just Famicom software. Currently, the total sits at almost 200, but we definitely have a long ways to go before we get all the pages put up, let alone have them filled to the brim with documentation for each separate software release. I mean, most pages kind of look like this right now, which, yeah, it's a bit bare bones, but we're getting there, I promise. But yeah, that's pretty much FamiWiki in a nutshell, and now you know why I'm frustrated when I hear people say the Famicom is a Japanese NES, because god damn it, it's not!